President Biden clearly thought that it was somewhat under control, that the attacks hadn't killed anybody, and that it was mostly sort of a performative act by the Iranians to show that they could attack.
Now, President Biden has promised an American response after 3 US troops were killed in a drone attack in Jordan. 34 people were injured in the attack, which is being blamed on Iran-backed militants. Alison McManus is the managing director of the Department of National Security at the Center for American Progress. She says a military response could come at any time.
I don't think that they'll wait too long, particularly because if we know now that Iran is equipping its militias and essentially giving the green light to target American troops, that's not something that's going to go without a response for very long. But obviously it may be, a number of days or weeks. But I would anticipate that we see a significant response quite soon.
Here, the Foreign Secretary has condemned the attack on US forces. Lord Cameron called on Iran to de-escalate. And many of this morning's papers discuss the fear of this escalating into a broader conflict with Tehran. The headline on the front of the Times is "Drone Strike on US Base Raises Fears of Iran War," whilst The Guardian goes with fears of US-Iran conflict intensify after troops killed in drone attack. I speak now to Elisabeth Braw, a Senior Associate Fellow at the think tank Atlantic Council and a columnist for Foreign Policy magazine. Good morning, Elisabeth. Worth saying, this hasn't necessarily come completely out of the blue, because American bases in Iraq and Syria have been attacked consistently over recent months. Do you think almost an incident like this, in which US troops were killed, was almost only a matter of time?
Well, we can say now that it was a matter of time, but President Biden clearly thought that it was somewhat under control, that the attacks hadn't killed anybody, and that it was mostly sort of a performative act by the Iranians to show that they could attack, or that their proxies could attack, but that they wouldn't go to this extent of killing Americans, because that would then put them in a position where the Americans may respond, which may happen now. So it may, you can say it was bound to happen. You can also say this is a serious escalation by the Iranians. But either way, President Biden is in a terrible bind now. How should he respond? Should he respond? And that is happening during the election campaign, where Donald Trump is absolutely certain to keep goading him and calling him a coward if he doesn't respond.
Yeah, we'll come on to what a potential US response might look like in a moment. Just on Iran's role in all of this, the US is blaming Iranian-backed militant groups. But how close are the links between these groups and the regime in Tehran? Can we say that the Iranian regime is responsible for what's happened, or is it more complicated than that?
It's more complicated, and it's, as is the case with all these militias that are linked to Iran. We know that they are linked to Iran, but we don't know exactly what sort of links there are during the planning of any given attack. And that's why it's still shrouded in mystery how much, for example, Iran has been involved in the Houthis attacks on shipping. Was it Iran's idea? Did Iran just tolerate it? Is Iran just tolerating it? We don't know, because we're just not that well connected to the Houthis. And it's the same case with this attack. We don't know, because we are not, i.e. the West, is not well enough connected with this group to be able to say how extensive the deliberations are with the Iranians. So Western analysts are saying Iran was behind it because Iran supports this group. Iran says it was not the case that it had anything to do with it, and says that it's the case of it's a situation where it's the US versus various militia groups in the region. So that also complicates the situation for Biden, because if Iran had said, yes, we were involved in a strike in the US against the US for this and that reason, then the US would be able to say, well, Iran has killed 3 of our service members, we will respond. But if the only basis on which you would respond, or Biden would respond, is that Iran is linked to this group, it's a much more tenuous situation or link, and that makes it even riskier for Biden if he were to respond or retaliate.
Yeah, and if he were to respond, retaliate, call it what you will, what would that look like?
Well, it would have to be some sort of forceful strike. I don't think it would be a strike against Iran itself, because that would just almost be unbearably risky. And we should remember that even when President Trump ordered that assassination of General Soleimani a few years ago, that's when it took place when Soleimani was out of the country, and even that was an extremely risky move, I would say, that strike. So I don't think we'll see a strike on Iran, but then if you don't conduct a strike against Iran, against what do you conduct a strike? But really the most fundamental decision, I think, for Biden is whether he says this was an attack by a militia, we will retaliate against the militia, or whether he says I'm of the conviction that Iran was behind it. We have to retaliate against Iran. And whatever he does, Twitter will be full of self-appointed Middle East experts who will say he did the wrong thing, and Trump will goad him, and everybody, well, half the world will think he did the right thing, half the world, or more than half the world will think he did the wrong thing, and he will have to do all of this under immense public scrutiny.